The Keddy murders. On the night of April 11th, 1981, Glenna Sharp, known as Sue, had settled into cabin 28 at the Keddy Resort in rural California with her children. The 36-year-old mother had relocated her family to this remote location, seeking safety and a fresh start after leaving a difficult relationship. The resort consisted of small rental cabins scattered among pine trees, offering affordable housing but also isolation. That evening, Sue's son John, 15 years old, had invited his friend Dana Wingate, 17, to spend the night. Sue's daughter Tina, 12 years old, was also in the cabin, while 3 younger boys slept in an adjacent bedroom. Sometime between the late evening hours and early morning of April 12th, someone entered cabin 28. The scene discovered the following morning revealed that Sue, John, and Dana had been bound with medical tape and electrical cords. The attack involved multiple weapons, including a hammer and kitchen knives. The nature of the binding suggested premeditation, as medical tape was not a common household item in the cabin. The weapons used were a combination of tools brought to the scene and items found within the cabin itself, indicating the perpetrator may have planned certain aspects while improvising others. Despite the intensity of what occurred in the main room, the 3 younger boys sleeping in the adjacent bedroom remained unharmed and claimed to have heard nothing unusual during the night. This peculiar detail would later perplex investigators, who struggled to understand how such events could unfold without waking the youngsters. When one of the boys woke the next morning and discovered the scene, he ran to a neighboring cabin for help. Tina was not found in the cabin. Her disappearance added another layer of mystery to an already disturbing case. 3 years and 11 days later, on April 22, 1984, a bottle collector discovered partial remains in Camp 18, located approximately 75 miles from Keddy. The remains were identified through dental records as belonging to Tina. The location where she was found suggested her remains had been placed there deliberately, though the exact circumstances of how she came to be at that remote location remained unclear. The initial investigation faced significant challenges from the outset. The crime scene was not properly secured, and numerous people walked through cabin 28 before forensic specialists could thoroughly document the evidence. Plumas County investigators collected what physical evidence they could, including the bindings, weapons, and various items that might contain trace evidence. However, the contamination of the scene complicated forensic analysis. Fingerprints were lifted from multiple surfaces, but the technology of the early 1980s limited what could be determined from them. One witness who became central to the investigation was Justin Smart, one of the 3 boys who slept through the events. Justin had been friends with one of Sue's sons and was sleeping in the cabin that night. Years later, Justin underwent hypnosis in an attempt to recover any suppressed memories. During these sessions, he provided descriptions that led to composite sketches of 2 potential suspects. His recollections under hypnosis described 2 men, one with a mustache and the other clean-shaven, though the reliability of memories recovered through hypnosis has been scientifically questioned. Suspicion fell on Martin Smart and his friend John Boubade, who lived in the cabin adjacent to the Sharps. Smart's wife, Marilyn, had been friends with Sue Sharp, creating a connection between the households. Investigators learned that Smart had made concerning statements and exhibited unusual behavior in the days following the events. A letter discovered by a detective in 2013 while organizing old Plumas County Sheriff's evidence files, which had been sent by Martin to his wife Marilyn but overlooked for decades, contained the chilling phrase, "I've paid the price of your love, and now I've bought it with 4 people's lives." The letter's incomplete nature and ambiguous wording made it difficult to determine whether it was a confession or unrelated personal correspondence. Boubade, who was staying with the Smarts at the time, also drew investigative attention. Both men were interviewed multiple times, and their alibis were scrutinized. However, physical evidence directly linking them to the scene was not conclusive enough to bring charges. The case grew cold as leads dried up and both primary suspects eventually left the area. Smart passed away in 2000, and Bubaidi died in 1988, both before DNA technology could provide more definitive answers. In 2016, a hammer discovered in a pond near the cabin was sent for testing. The location of the pond made it plausible that the weapon could have been discarded there by whoever committed the acts. DNA analysis of the hammer in 2018 revealed genetic material, but the results did not lead to any arrests. The complex nature of the DNA evidence, including potential degradation from years underwater and contamination possibilities, made interpretation challenging. How did someone enter without waking the entire household? Why were the 3 boys in the adjacent room left unharmed? Joshua Maddox. On May 8, 2008, 18-year-old Joshua Maddox left his family's home in Woodland Park, Colorado, for what he said would be a short walk. Described by those who knew him as creative and introspective, Joshua had recently completed his studies and was navigating the transition to adulthood. He had interests in music and art, and friends remembered him as someone who marched to his own rhythm. That morning, he left wearing only a light jacket despite the Colorado spring weather, telling family members he would return soon. Joshua never came home. His family immediately reported him as missing, and local authorities launched a search effort. Woodland Park, a small community at the base of Pikes Peak, mobilized volunteers to search the surrounding forests and trails. Days turned into weeks, then months, with no trace of Joshua. His family distributed flyers, organized additional search parties, and worked with investigators to follow every possible lead. The case received local media coverage, but no credible sightings emerged. 7 years later, in August 2015, construction workers arrived at an abandoned cabin on Thunderhead Lane to begin demolition. The small structure had sat empty for years and was scheduled for removal. As workers began to dismantle the cabin, they made a disturbing discovery in the chimney. A mummified body positioned head down. The remains were wedged tightly in the narrow flue, compressed by years in the confined space. The body was not fully clothed, with articles of clothing found both on the body and near the chimney opening. Forensic examination and dental records confirmed the identity as Joshua Maddox, finally giving his family an answer to where he had been, though raising countless new questions about how he came to be there. The position and condition of the remains raised immediate questions. The body was found wearing only a thermal shirt. His pants, socks, and shoes were found inside the cabin, placed neatly by the hearth, which made the theory of him entering the chimney from the outside even more baffling. The cabin was located near Joshua's usual walking routes, making it possible he could have discovered it during his walk. The internal dimensions of the flue were approximately 8 inches by 17 inches, though the entry was complicated by heavy steel rebar mesh that the owner claimed had been welded over the top of the chimney to prevent access. The autopsy report provided limited information. Due to the mummification and time elapsed, determining an exact cause of passing proved challenging. No obvious signs of trauma were evident on the skeletal remains, though soft tissue injuries would not have been preserved. Toxicology tests were inconclusive given the state of decomposition. The medical examiner's office classified the manner as undetermined, neither ruling in nor out the possibility of another person's involvement. What emerged during the investigation was that multiple people had reported suspicious activity at the cabin to authorities over the years. Some reports mentioned seeing individuals near the property or noticing the door ajar despite the cabin being abandoned. However, these reports were not connected to Joshua's missing person case until after his remains were discovered. The failure to investigate the cabin earlier became a point of frustration for his family. The question that haunts investigators and Joshua's family is straightforward yet impossible to answer with certainty. How did he end up in that chimney? The accidental entry theory requires accepting that Joshua voluntarily removed his lower clothing, climbed onto the roof of an abandoned cabin, and attempted to enter through an opening barely wider than his shoulders. Alternative theories suggest someone else was involved, possibly placing Joshua in the chimney after something else occurred. The case remains officially open, but without active leads. Could someone have forced him into the chimney? Or was this a tragic miscalculation during an exploration? The Sodder family. Christmas Eve, 1945, should have been a joyful occasion for the Sodder family in Fayetteville, West Virginia. George and Jenny Sodder had created a life in America after emigrating from Italy, building a successful trucking business and raising 10 offspring. That night, 9 of their kids were home while the eldest son was serving in the military. The family had celebrated the holiday with extended family earlier in the day, and most had gone to bed by 10 o'clock that evening. At 12:30 in the morning, Jenny was woken by a wrong number phone call, then heard a loud thud on the roof. It wasn't until 1:30 that she finally woke again to the smell of smoke and found the fire. She discovered that the house was on fire, with flames already spreading through the lower level and climbing toward the second floor where most of the family slept. George and Jenny, along with 4 of their offspring, managed to escape through windows and doors, some jumping from second-story windows to safety. The escaped family members gathered on the lawn, frantically calling out for the others. However, 5 remained inside. Maurice, 14 years old, Martha, 12, Louis, 9, Jenny, 8, and Betty, 5. All 5 had been sleeping in upstairs bedrooms, and despite the calls from family members outside, none appeared at the windows or responded to shouts. George attempted to reach the upstairs bedrooms where the missing ones slept, but was driven back by intense heat and smoke that made the stairway impassable. The flames had engulfed the stairwell, cutting off the primary route to the second floor and making rescue attempts through the interior impossible. George rushed outside to get a ladder that was usually propped against the house, but it was missing. He tried to start his 2 trucks to drive them close to the house and climb on top of the vehicles to reach the second floor. But neither truck would start, despite both having worked perfectly the day before. The nearest fire department was not notified for over 7 hours, and by the time firefighters arrived, the house had collapsed into its basement. Chief F.J. Morris led the response, and his crew sifted through the ashes once they cooled. The investigation of the fire scene yielded no remains. Chief Morris reported finding no bones, teeth, or any physical evidence that the 5 young people had perished in the blaze. This absence of remains struck the Sodders and others as highly unusual. Fire experts and crematorium operators later explained that house fires, even intense ones, do not typically cremate human remains so completely that nothing is left. Bone fragments, teeth, and other remnants generally survive even severe fires. George Sodder began investigating on his own. He learned that an insurance salesman had threatened him months before the fire, saying his house would go up in smoke. The threat had followed an argument about Benito Mussolini, as George had been vocal in his criticism of the Italian dictator. George also discovered that the local fire chief had actually helped sell the Sodder house to them, and later bought the plot where the house once stood, creating a potential conflict of interest. Witnesses began coming forward with accounts that deepened the mystery. A woman staying at a hotel 50 miles from Fayetteville reported seeing the 5 youngsters along with several adults at a rest stop on the morning of December 25th. Another witness claimed to have seen the ones being put into a car heading toward Charleston early Christmas morning. Fire Chief F.J. Morris later admitted to planting a beef liver among the ashes, which he had placed in a box and buried at the scene in an attempt to provide the family with closure and end the investigation. George hired a private investigator in the following years, and the family put up a billboard along Route 60 displaying photographs of the missing five and offering a reward. The billboard remained in place for decades. In 1968, the family received a photograph postmarked from Kentucky showing a young man who bore a striking resemblance to Lewis, with a cryptic note on the back reading, "Lewis Sauter, I love brother Frankie. Lil Boys, A90132. The Sauters hired another investigator to track down the photograph's origin, but the investigator disappeared without filing a report or returning their money. George Sauter passed away in 1969 and Jenny in 1989, both without ever learning what happened. The surviving members of the Sauter family have continued to seek answers. The prevailing theory among those who question the official narrative is that the fire was deliberately set as a cover for an abduction, possibly related to George's vocal opposition to Mussolini and connections to organized crime figures who supported the Italian government. Did the five escape the fire only to be taken? Or did something else occur that cold Christmas morning? The Hinterkaifeck murders. The Gruber family farm at Hinterkaifeck, located roughly 43 miles north of Munich in Bavaria, Germany, was an isolated farmstead in 1922. Andreas Gruber, 63 years old, ran the farm with his wife Cecilia, 72. Also living on the property were Andreas and Cecilia's widowed daughter, Victoria Gabriel, 35, and her two offspring, Cecilia, 7 years old, and Joseph, 2. A new maid, Maria Baumgartner, 44 years old, had arrived at the farm on March 31, 1922, her first day of employment. The previous maid had left 6 months earlier, claiming the farmhouse was haunted. In the days before March 31st, Andreas discovered footprints leading from the woods to the machine house, where the door lock had been picked. Despite a full search of the property, he found no one, even though he continued to hear heavy footsteps coming from the attic. The prints led from the forest to the farm, but did not lead back out, suggesting someone had approached the property and either remained or left by a different route. Andreas also reported hearing footsteps in the attic and discovering an unfamiliar newspaper from Munich on the farm, one that the family did not subscribe to and that the postman did not deliver. These occurrences troubled him enough that he discussed them with others, though he did not report them to authorities. On the evening of March 31st, someone attacked the family. The forensic evidence later suggested that Andreas, Cecilia the elder, Victoria, and young Cecilia were lured one by one to the barn, where they were struck with a mattock, a farming tool similar to a pickaxe. The little one Joseph and the maid Maria were attacked in their beds in the house. The method suggested familiarity with the farm layout and the family's routines. The bodies were not discovered until April 4th, 4 days after the events occurred. Neighbors became concerned when the family failed to attend church on Sunday, and no one from the farm appeared at the local market on Monday as they usually did. When a search party finally entered the property, they found the 4 bodies in the barn, covered with hay and straw, and the 2 in the house. What made this case particularly unsettling was evidence that someone had remained at the farm in the days between the attacks and the discovery. The livestock had been fed and cared for. Fires had been lit in the house to keep it warm, and food from the kitchen had been eaten. Neighbors reported seeing smoke rising from the farmhouse chimney during those days, indicating someone was inside maintaining normal activities. The investigation was led by Munich police, who interviewed over 100 people and investigated potential suspects. The crime scene had been heavily contaminated by the time trained investigators arrived, as curious locals had walked through the barn and house. This contamination made it difficult to distinguish evidence left by the perpetrator from that left by visitors. Fingerprinting technology existed in 1922, but was not as refined as modern techniques. The forensic pathologist who examined the bodies determined that the matic blows had been delivered with significant force. The sequence of attacks indicated that the perpetrator had knowledge of the farm layout and the family's evening routines. Lorenz Schlittenbauer, a neighbor and former romantic interest of Victoria's, drew particular attention. Schlittenbauer had been part of the group that discovered the bodies, and his behavior during that discovery raised questions. He reportedly went directly to the area where bodies were hidden without being directed there, suggesting prior knowledge. He had also been involved in a paternity dispute with Victoria regarding young Joseph. While a 2007 modern investigation applied new forensic theories to the case, the results regarding the killer's identity and the family's genetic links were never made public out of respect for the descendants' privacy. Recent analysis using modern forensic techniques has not definitively solved the case, though it has eliminated some historical suspects. The combination of poor initial investigation practices, contaminated evidence, and the passage of over a century has made resolution increasingly unlikely. The farm buildings were demolished in 1923, removing the physical crime scene from further examination. Who could have carried this out with such calculated precision? And why stay in a place of such horror? Mateusz Kawecki. Mateusz Kawecki, 30 years old, worked as a stable hand at a facility in Germany in March 2018. Originally from Poland, Mateusz was expecting his first offspring with his girlfriend back home. The birth was imminent, and Mateusz planned to travel from Germany to Poland to be present for this significant moment. Those who knew him described him as responsible and excited about becoming a father. On March 28, 2018, Mateusz left his workplace in Germany, heading toward Poland. He was driving his Volkswagen Passat and maintaining contact with his girlfriend through text messages. The last confirmed communication from Mateusz came that evening, after which he went silent. His girlfriend, growing increasingly worried when he failed to arrive and stopped responding to messages, reported him missing. Polish authorities initiated a search, but Mateusz's vehicle was not located despite checks at border crossings and along expected routes. His family began their own search efforts, distributing information through social media and community networks. Months passed with no trace of Mateusz or his vehicle. His girlfriend gave birth without him present, and the family's desperation grew as time elapsed. In July 2018, approximately 4 months after Mateusz's disappearance, his family made a disturbing discovery. While searching buildings on property owned by Mateusz's family in Hutkov, Poland, they found his remains in a barn. The body was in an advanced state of decomposition, making immediate determination of circumstances difficult. Most troubling was that the head had been found separated from the body. However, forensic experts concluded this was a natural result of the body hanging for several months and the ensuing advanced decomposition. The forensic examination revealed no signs of third-party involvement or struggle. And while no foreign DNA was found, the family highlighted that 2 different nooses were found at the scene, which they felt contradicted the suicide ruling. The barn where he was found was on property familiar to him, though it was not his primary residence. His vehicle was never recovered, adding another layer of mystery to the case. If Mateusz had driven to the location, what happened to the Volkswagen Passat? Polish prosecutors ruled the manner as self-inflicted, a conclusion that sparked immediate controversy. The official statement from prosecutors read, "The evidence unequivocally points to a suicide." However, this determination was met with strong opposition from Mateusz's family and friends, who pointed to several inconsistencies. The family raised questions about the physical circumstances. The separation of the head and the advanced decomposition made it difficult to establish exactly how this occurred. Some reports indicated the possibility of animal activity contributing to the condition of the remains. But this did not fully explain all aspects of the scene. The family also emphasized that Mateusz had been excited about becoming a father and showed no signs of distress in his final communications. Witnesses reported seeing Mateusz in a vehicle with another person around the time of his disappearance, though this individual was never identified. The family questioned why police did not pursue this lead more aggressively. They also pointed out that the barn location, while on family property, was not somewhere Mateusz would typically go, especially when traveling to see his girlfriend for the birth of their offspring. The questions surrounding Mateusz's case remain troubling. How did he end up at that specific barn when his intended destination was elsewhere? Where is his vehicle, and who drove it away from the scene? Who was the person reportedly seen with him? The family continues to seek answers, maintaining that the truth has not yet been uncovered. If you've made it this far and enjoy deep dives into the most shocking criminal cases, hit that subscribe button and don't forget to press the bell icon. What linked an intelligence operative to a locked bag would prove even stranger than fiction? Gareth Wynne Williams. Gareth Wynne Williams was born on September 26, 1978, in Wales. From an early age, he demonstrated exceptional mathematical ability, earning a place at Bangor University at 15 years old to study mathematics. By 17, he had graduated and moved to Cambridge University for postgraduate studies. His remarkable intellect caught the attention of British intelligence services, and he was recruited to work for GCHQ, the government communications headquarters, where he specialized in cryptography. His talents eventually led to a secondment with MI6, Britain's secret intelligence service, assigned to work at their London headquarters. In August 2010, Williams was living in a flat on Alderney Street in Pimlico, London, a property maintained by MI6 for its operatives. The 31-year-old kept a low profile and maintained the discretion expected of someone in his position. He had been scheduled to attend meetings at MI6 headquarters, but failed to appear, which was unusual for someone known for punctuality and reliability. When colleagues could not reach him and he missed multiple scheduled appointments, concern grew within the intelligence community. On August 23, 2010, police were called to Williams' flat to conduct a welfare check. Officers arrived at the property and gained entry to the residence. In the bathroom, they discovered Williams' body inside a red North Face duffel bag that had been placed in the bathtub. The bag was locked from the outside with a padlock, and the key to the padlock was found inside the bag underneath Williams' body. The heating in the flat had been left on, accelerating decomposition, which complicated the determination of exactly when he had passed. The post-mortem examination could not establish a definitive cause, as the advanced state of decomposition obscured many potential indicators. Toxicology tests were conducted, but the decomposition limited what could be detected. There were no signs of trauma to the body that had survived decomposition, no evidence of struggle in the flat, and no defensive wounds. The pathologist estimated Williams had been in the bag for approximately 7 days before discovery. The locked bag became the central mystery of the case. Investigators attempted to determine whether someone could lock themselves inside such a bag. Police conducted experiments with experts, including escape artists and contortionists, to test whether self-entry and self-locking were possible. While initial tests suggested it was impossible, a retired Army sergeant and an expert contortionist eventually demonstrated for the inquest that it was physically possible, though extremely difficult, to lock oneself in that specific model of North Face bag. From the inside, forensic examination of the flat revealed limited evidence. No fingerprints other than Williams were found on the bag, the padlock, or in the bathroom. The lack of third-party DNA or prints was notable, but not conclusive, as it could indicate either that Williams was alone or that someone had been careful to avoid leaving traces. The flat showed no signs of forced entry, and there was no evidence of a struggle or disturbance. Williams's personal belongings, including expensive electronics and his mobile phones, remained in the flat untouched. In May 2012, Coroner Fiona Wilcox delivered her findings at the inquest. After reviewing all evidence, witness testimony, and expert opinions, Wilcox stated that Williams's passing was criminally mediated, meaning she believed another person or persons were involved. The coroner emphasized that the evidence strongly suggested Williams could not have locked himself in the bag, and therefore someone else must have been present. However, Metropolitan Police conducted a further review in 2013 and reached a different conclusion. Their investigators theorized that Williams could have locked himself in the bag as part of an activity that went wrong, though they acknowledged the difficulty of this scenario. A 2013 review by the Metropolitan Police, upheld in subsequent forensic audits, concluded that it was probable his death was a solitary accident, reversing the coroner's earlier finding of criminally mediated death. The next case would shatter a family in ways that defied comprehension. Dardeen murders. The Dardeen family lived in Ina, Illinois, a small community in Jefferson County. Russell Keith Dardeen, 29 years old, worked as an operator at a local water treatment plant. He sang in the church choir and was devoted to his wife, Ruby Elaine, 30 years old, who worked in an office. The couple had a 2-year-old son named Peter and were expecting their second offspring in late November 1987. On November 17, 1987, Keith reported to his night shift at the water treatment plant. He worked through the night into the early morning hours of November 18th, when his shift ended around 6 o'clock in the morning. Keith drove home to the family's mobile home outside Ina. What he encountered there would lead to his own demise. When Keith failed to report for his next scheduled shift, co-workers became concerned. This was uncharacteristic behavior for someone known for reliability. Police were asked to conduct a welfare check at the Dardeen residence. On November 18th, police found Keith's empty car at a hospital in Mount Vernon. His body was discovered later that day in a remote wheat field, where he had been shot and brutally mutilated. He had been shot multiple times, and his body showed signs of severe trauma beyond the gunshot wounds. Inside the mobile home, investigators found Ruby Elaine, young Peter, and a newborn infant daughter. The scene was one of extreme brutality. Ruby Elaine had been struck repeatedly with a baseball bat. The trauma was so extreme that it forced the birth of her daughter, whom the killer then murdered along with Ruby and Peter. The crime scene showed no signs of forced entry into the mobile home. This suggested that either the perpetrator had been let inside by Ruby Elaine, or they had some means of entering without breaking in. There was no evidence of any inappropriate relations, and the motive did not appear to be connected to such acts. Nothing of significant value was reported missing from the home, ruling out robbery as a primary motive. The randomness and extreme nature of the attacks suggested either personal rage or the work of someone deeply disturbed. The investigation focused on reconstructing the timeline. Based on evidence, investigators determined the attacks inside occurred first, likely on the evening of November 17th or very early morning of November 18th. Keith was believed to have been ambushed when he arrived home, discovering the scene and then being shot outside. The weapons were a baseball bat found at the scene and a firearm. Investigators interviewed neighbors, co-workers, family members, and anyone connected to the Dardeens. No one could identify any conflicts, threats, or unusual incidents in the days leading up to the attacks. The family appeared to have no enemies. This lack of obvious motive made the case particularly baffling. In 2010, convicted serial killer Tommy Lynn Sells claimed, responsibility for the Dardeen family case. Sells, on death row in Texas, provided a confession with details about the case. He claimed he had been hitchhiking through Illinois in November 1987 and encountered the family. However, significant problems emerged with his confession. Keith's mother, Joanne Dardeen, publicly rejected Sells' confession. She pointed out inconsistencies in his account and expressed doubt that he was the actual perpetrator. Investigators also noted that some details Sells provided did not match the physical evidence from the scene. Sells had a documented history of making false confessions to crimes he did not commit, often incorporating details he learned from media coverage or other sources. Without physical evidence linking Sells to the Dardeen home, and with the inconsistencies in his story, authorities could not definitively credit his confession. Tommy Lynn Sells was executed in Texas in April 2014, taking whatever knowledge he may have had to his grave. Whether he was truly responsible for the Dardeen case or simply another false claim in his long list of confessions remains unknown. The case file remains open, with no other suspects identified and no arrests made. But this terror would pale compared to what haunted an entire county for years. The Oakland County child murders. Between February 15, 1976 and March 16, 1977, Oakland County, Michigan experienced a series of events that terrorized the community. 4 young people disappeared from suburban neighborhoods, only to be found days later. The perpetrator, known as the Oakland County offender, was never identified, though DNA evidence and witness descriptions have provided leads over the decades. Mark Stebbins disappeared on February 15, 1976, after leaving an American Legion Hall in Ferndale, where he had been watching a movie. 4 days later, his body was discovered in a Southfield parking lot. The evidence showed he had been held captive during those 4 days, kept clean and fed before being placed where he was found. His clothing was neatly arranged, and there were no signs of struggle at the location where he was discovered. Jill Robinson went missing on December 22, 1976, after an argument with her mother in Royal Oak. She had left her home on her bicycle, intending to run away. 4 days later, her body was found along Interstate 75 in Troy. Like Mark, Jill had been held during the time she was missing, and her body showed she had been cared for before being placed at the discovery location. Her bicycle was found nearby, suggesting the perpetrator had transported both Jill and her bicycle to the site. Christine Mihalik disappeared on January 2, 1977, while walking home from a store in Berkeley where she had purchased a magazine. 19 days later, her body was discovered in a snowbank in Franklin Village. The extended time she was held was consistent with the pattern, and again, evidence suggested she had been fed and kept clean. Her clothing was freshly laundered, indicating the perpetrator had maintained a disturbing level of care during captivity. Timothy King was last seen on March 16, 1977, after leaving a hobby store in Birmingham where he had purchased modeling supplies. He was found 6 days later in a ditch in Livonia. Timothy's case provided a chilling detail. His last meal was fried chicken, and his mother had famously made a televised plea for him to come home and have his favorite dinner, Kentucky Fried Chicken, leading to theories that the killer was mocking the family. Like the others, his clothing was clean and his body showed signs of having been cared for during captivity. The pattern was consistent across all 4 cases. Each victim was held for days, kept clean and fed, then placed in public locations where they would be found. None were hidden or buried, suggesting the perpetrator wanted the bodies discovered. This behavior indicated someone who was organized, had a location to hold victims, and possessed enough self-control to maintain a routine of care before ending their lives. Forensic analysis produced composite sketches based on witness, descriptions of suspicious vehicles and individuals seen near abduction sites. Witnesses reported a dark blue AMC Gremlin near the abduction of Timothy King, and significantly, a similar car was seen near the site where Mark Stebbins' body was found, linking the vehicle to both the beginning and end of the spree. Physical evidence collected from the bodies included hair samples that did not match the victims, providing DNA material that would become crucial in later years. One suspect who drew significant attention was Christopher Bush, who had a history of concerning offenses and lived in Oakland County during the time period. Bush was found deceased in 1978, though his family has disputed the official determination. Items belonging to Mark Stebbins were reportedly found in his possession. Another individual linked to the investigation was Gregory Green, an associate of Bush who passed away in prison in 2012. Green had been questioned about the Oakland County cases, but was never charged. Theodore Lamborghini, another associate of Bush, was also investigated. Lamborghini had a history of offenses and was incarcerated for life for unrelated crimes. He has been interviewed multiple times about the Oakland County cases, but has not provided information leading to resolution. The most extensively investigated suspect has been Arch Sloan, who was questioned extensively during the original investigation. Reports indicate that Sloan failed multiple polygraph examinations when questioned about the cases, though polygraph results are not admissible as evidence. Sloan passed away in the early 2000s without being charged. In 2012, DNA testing on a hair found on Timothy King's clothing was matched to Archibald Sloan, though this only placed his car or person in contact with the victim and did not provide enough evidence for a posthumous murder conviction. The hairs found on multiple victims were consistent with coming from the same person, supporting a single perpetrator theory. However, the DNA profile has not matched any individual in existing databases. Investigators have explored whether the perpetrator may have been part of a group rather than acting alone. The level of organization suggested resources and planning. Some theories have pointed to connections between suspects, though concrete evidence has not emerged. After Timothy King in March 1977, no additional victims fitting the pattern were identified in Oakland County. Whether the perpetrator moved, was incarcerated, passed away, or stopped remains unknown. The investigation remains open, with Oakland County Sheriff's Office continuing to review evidence. While communities reeled from such organized evil, another case would prove that danger could strike from within trusted circles. Eric Tamiyasu. Eric Tamiyasu, 41 years old, lived in Parkdale, Oregon, a small community in the Columbia River Gorge. He worked as a management consultant and was known for his friendly demeanor. Eric had developed a close friendship with Diana Anderson, a woman who lived in the area and with whom he shared business interests. On the night of October 1st, 2001, Eric was in his home alone. He was discovered deceased in his bed on October 4th. The house was a single-story residence where Eric lived by himself, maintaining his independence while staying connected to friends and family in the area. Sometime during the night or early morning hours of October 14th, someone shot Eric while he was in his bed. He was struck by 3 bullets, and the attack occurred while he was sleeping or resting in his bedroom. When Eric's body was discovered, investigators found no signs of forced entry into the home. The doors and windows showed no evidence of being jimmied or broken, and the locks were intact. This crucial detail suggested that either Eric had let someone inside, the perpetrator had a key, or entry was gained through an unlocked door. The crime scene itself was relatively contained, with the primary focus being the bedroom where Eric was found. Hood River County Sheriff's Office led the investigation. Detectives processed the scene, collecting evidence, including the bullets and any trace materials that might identify the perpetrator. However, A significant setback occurred when a person of interest washed the bloody bedding in Eric's washing machine before investigators arrived, destroying nearly all potential DNA and trace evidence. The circumstances of how this bedding came to be burned became a point of controversy in the investigation. Several individuals became persons of interest. Diana Anderson, with whom Eric had the close friendship, was among those questioned extensively. Some reports suggested their relationship may have been transitioning to something more personal, though the exact nature remained subject to interpretation. Anderson cooperated, but was never charged. Joe Cuppins, the Hood River County Sheriff at the time, also became a focus of scrutiny. Rumors circulated about a potential relationship between Cuppins and Diana Anderson, leading to theories about possible motives. Cuppins denied involvement and cooperated with outside investigators. Theories about motive have ranged from personal relationships to financial matters. Some have suggested Eric may have been involved in business dealings that created enemies, though no specific conflicts have been identified. The possibility of a romantic triangle has been explored, though concrete evidence has not emerged. The lack of forced entry remains one of the most significant clues. It suggests Eric either knew his attacker well enough to let them inside, or the person had access to the home through other means. The fact that Eric was in his bed when shot indicates he may not have perceived any immediate threat, either because he trusted whoever was present or was unaware someone had entered. The case remains open with the Hood River County Sheriff's Office. The final case takes us from a quiet bedroom to a wild jungle where two friends vanished without a trace. The Creemers and Froon case. Chris Creemers, 21 years old, and Lisanne Froon, 22, were best friends from the Netherlands who traveled to Panama in March 2014. Both were students who had saved money to volunteer abroad, with plans to work with local communities in Boquete. Chris was studying cultural social work, while Lisanne was pursuing applied psychology. On April 1st, 2014, Chris and Lisanne set out to hike the El Pianista Trail, a popular path near Boquete. The trail was known to locals and tourists, though it could become challenging in certain sections. The women were seen beginning their hike around 11 o'clock in the morning, appearing in good spirits. When the young women failed to return that evening, their host family reported them missing. Search efforts began immediately, with local authorities and volunteers combing the trail and surrounding areas. Despite extensive efforts involving helicopters and search teams, no trace was found initially. 10 weeks after their disappearance, in June 2014, a local woman found a blue backpack along the banks of the Culebra River, several miles from where the El Pianista Trail ended. The backpack was in remarkably good condition, despite being exposed to the elements for over 2 months. Inside, investigators found both women's phones, a camera, money, and other personal items. Crucially, the electronics still functioned, allowing investigators to examine their contents. Analysis of the phones revealed a troubling pattern. On April 1st, hours after the women were last seen, emergency calls were attempted from both phones. Multiple attempts were made to reach 112, the European emergency number, and 911. However, none of the calls connected, likely due to lack of cellular signal in the remote area. The pattern of attempted calls continued over the following days, with the phones being briefly powered on to attempt emergency contact, then powered off presumably to conserve battery. The digital camera contained photos documenting the women's hike. Images from April 1st showed Chris and Lisanne on the trail at various points. The photos appeared normal until showing the women had continued past the typical turnaround point. The final daytime photo was taken at 1:33 in the afternoon, showing a location beyond where most hikers ventured. What followed was particularly disturbing. No photos were taken for over a week. Then between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. on April 8th, a sequence of 99 photos was taken. with the mysterious photo 509 missing entirely from the digital record. The nighttime photos showed mostly darkness and vegetation. But photo number 580 clearly shows a close-up of the back of Chris's head, with her hair appearing dry and clean despite the harsh jungle conditions. The photos seem to show someone using the camera's flash as a makeshift flashlight or attempting to signal for help. Some images showed markers made from sticks or rocks, possibly attempting to create signals. In the months following the backpack discovery, remains were found in the jungle. A hiking boot belonging to Lizanne was found with her foot still inside. Forensic analysis noted multiple metatarsal fractures, which could indicate a significant fall from a height, such as from the monkey bridges over the river. Additional bone fragments belonging to both women were recovered from various locations along the river system. The scattered nature of the remains and their condition sparked significant debate. Forensic examination of the remains revealed they were extensively decomposed and appeared bleached, which some experts attributed to natural processes in the jungle environment, while others found this unusual given the time frame. No obvious signs of trauma were evident on the bones that were recovered, though the fragmentary nature of the remains made comprehensive analysis difficult. The official determination by Panamanian authorities was that the women became lost on the trail, possibly after continuing beyond the usual turnaround point and becoming disoriented in the jungle. The theory suggests they were unable to find their way back, eventually succumbing to exposure, injury, or lack of water and food. The nighttime photos were interpreted as attempts to signal for help or illuminate their surroundings. However, several aspects of the case have fueled alternative theories. Some observers have noted that image files on the camera show gaps in numbering, suggesting photos may have been deleted, though this could also be explained by accidental deletions or automatic camera functions. The pristine condition of the backpack after 10 weeks in the jungle environment seemed unusual to some investigators, though others noted that items in rivers can be protected from some environmental factors. The parents of both young women have sought additional investigations, hiring experts to review the evidence. They have questioned aspects of the official conclusion and pressed for more thorough analysis. In 2025, the case continued to receive attention from investigators and media outlets, though no new definitive answers have emerged. This was all from our side today. Thanks for watching. Click here to check out another video.